Welcome to the APL Show. Angels, positivity, and love. Amazing guests the world over with incredible insights. Here to help us all on our own unique journey of expansion, more consciousness, and a little more kindness, compassion, and love, too. We have just fabulous guests with all sorts of backgrounds. We've had a SETI scientist, a White House physician, to the US president, the youngest Delta Force operator ever admitted to Delta Force. He studied naturopathy. Australian actor Ian Stenlake, if you've ever seen Sea Patrol on Amazon Prime, or any of the musicals he does down under. Plus tons of healers and researchers, scientists, psychotherapists, and doctors galore. So be sure to stick around to the end of these shows. A lot of guests end up taking some steps, whether we're lighting sage, you get to catch the sage, or even talking to the universe, listening to the universe, you can participate. That's something that often gets missed. And finally, public service announcement. We've gone to 2 shows a week in 2025, so the guest list is stretched out to August of 2026. Anytime you can comment, share, like, subscribe, even hit that notification bell. It helps other people see this show and enjoy the experience. An emoji counts for a comment. A lot of more emojis have been popping up lately, so just do an emoji. It's okay. Coming back to the show, super excited to have him on. Researcher extraordinaire, award-winning author, basically a professor, a historian, if you want, of religion, near-death experiences, consciousness, the afterlife, and more. Can't wait to see where he goes in 2026 and beyond. We've got Gregory Shushan coming to us from California. Gregory, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Michael. And thanks for having me back on.
Great to see you. And you and
You
I were
too.
in
Yeah.
the Afterlife Summit for one of those organizations. Like this is a couple years ago, might have been in 2022 in the fall. We were each of us were one of those 30 experts featured
Right.
jointly. That's when I
Right.
first
Yeah.
saw your name. So I am just so thankful to have you on the program.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Talk to us a little bit about, have you been noticing anything for mankind? More consciousness coming in. That seems to be a big topic these days, that mankind's sort of on the brink of a little bit more awareness. Do you have an opinion on that one?
I sure hope that's true. I see it's definitely a transformational time. And things seem to be a little in a strange tipping point in a balance because a lot of the I don't know, it's almost tribal type affiliations that people have had in the past are now kind of merging, and you can't really identify who somebody is by one particular aspect of their personality, for example. So I'm thinking of things like people who are interested in yoga, naturopathy, and maybe they're vegan and whatever, but they're also neo-Nazis or something like this. So it's um it's a strange time in history, I think, because it used to be that a lot of those things meant that that person was going to be an open-minded, liberal, accepting, one love, one universe type of mentality, rather than like I have all these new age, for a better want of a better term, ideologies and practices, and yet I'm filled with hatred. So that's to me is a unique thing in the time that we're in, and I'm hoping that it's going to correct and the more positive spiritual consciousness is going to prevail.
Do you
But
feel
but
like
I
somebody took the Monopoly game and just sort of dumped all the pieces on the ground?
exactly, yeah, yeah, and maybe cut off a piece of the little dog figure and glued it to the house figure. Things are a little twisted lately.
Uh, well,
But I mean, there are good things as well, and there are people doing a lot of good things out there. So and there's lots of good research being done. There's lots going on in near-death studies and other areas of consciousness studies. So um, yeah, I think it's a rebalancing time, maybe.
yeah. And you're super well known for your near-death experience studies, more back in the past, not necessarily current, but looking back culturally across the globe, talking about the afterlife, and this spills into consciousness and so on. It means you've had to play like scientist, researcher, very strict protocols at time, and also how you document when you write. But talk to us about how there's sort of two yous. There's that side, but then there's the experiential side that starts to feel it. And can you talk to us about the kind of two different directions you've had to experience?
Sure. Yeah, I haven't had a near-death experience myself, or any super profound type of mystical experience. Like I haven't. had an out of body experience, except for when I'm asleep. I've had lucid dreams, which may have been out of body experiences for all I know. They were pretty real. And so lucid dreams, psychedelic experiences, things like that are probably the closest I've gone to having a full-blown mystical experience. I've had things in nature and in meditation where you feel that connection and oneness. But as far as something super dramatic like an NDE, I haven't experienced that. So, but I feel like because of the experiences I have had, I sort of get what's going on with the states of consciousness that people are in when they have those experiences. And in fact, I do wonder if it's similar to a lucid dream, the sort of afterlife state or the near-death experience state, where you're, asleep and dreaming, but your consciousness is just firing on all cylinders and everything is more real than real. And that's how a lot of the lucid dreamers and near-death experiences will describe that state, more real than this reality. So yeah, I've got that, which I hope is just like, as far as the research goes, it's like an empathetic way of understanding from the point of view of the experiencer, at least a little bit. But then it's really trying to be objective and not even judging the experiences on the level of whether they're true or not, but just accepting what the people are saying and then looking at them in terms of religious beliefs and how these kinds of experiences have shaped our beliefs in the afterlife throughout history. So,
Wonderful. I'm about to ask you about one of those out of body, well, lucid dream experiences, and if you could take us through one. But I did want to go sideways and get back to the opening of the show. It was the Shift Network Afterlife Summit, probably fall of 2022, I believe. 30 of us,
right,
Giesemann was on it. Um, yeah, and so on. So that was the original way I came across your name. And again,
right,
thank you
yeah.
for being here. Okay, which lucid dream could you share with us in detail and take us through it? And I hope if it's too private, don't. But I'm hoping there's some color, some flavor here for you to share.
Yeah, I would say the most recent and from the perspective of NDE's most interesting one was a dream of an out-of-body experience where um, I was asleep in my bed, and in my dream or in my lucid dream or in whatever experience you want to call it, I had left my body, and so I was still in the same room, and that's what makes it, so particularly real because there's nothing about the dream that's making you think I'm in some other realm. This must be a dream. So and I think because I'll just backtrack a little bit. There were some near-death experience studies where they put symbols on top of equipment in cardiac arrest wards, with the idea that if somebody had an NDE and they floated out of their body, they would be able to see the symbol on top of the equipment, and then when they came back, they would say, "What's that picture of a horse doing up there?" Unfortunately, they didn't get any hits, but I always thought that was a really interesting experimental protocol. So in this lucid dream that I had, I floated out of my body and I'm hovering up near the ceiling. And I look on top of this large armoire that was in my room. And I'm looking up there to see if there's something that I don't know is there in my real life, in my waking life. So I would then be able to wake up and then go up there and check to see if it was really up there. But again, just like those experiments, I didn't see anything. There was a little piece of paper and I couldn't tell what it was and came back to my body. And then there was nothing up there when I woke up the next day. But I thought that was really interesting just because, for one thing, it was extremely real. Uh, you know, if I didn't have a sort of lucid dreaming consciousness going on at the time, I would have been surprised if I just woke up back in my body awake and wasn't dreaming at all. So yeah, it was just an interesting experience like that. And then I've also had a couple in the past. In fact, when I was a teenager, when I was sort of 18, I had there's a book by I think it's Stephen LaBerge about lucid dreaming, and he walks you through different techniques that you can do in order to manipulate your dream reality. And one of them in particular is if you find yourself waking up to imagine yourself spinning and basically just kind of whirl around spinning like a top. And that will either anchor you in the place where you are so you don't come out of the lucid dream, or you can also use it to bounce into another landscape or reality. So I was able to do that as a teenager, and that was pretty amazing. But I did find it was giving me headaches, and so that's why I stopped actively sort of practicing it. But even then, even with these experiences, there's part of my brain that's saying, that's interesting, but it's possibly just my brain and some mysterious process of the way my consciousness works within my brain that's creating this experience. So,
When did you start meditating?
um, on and off. Well, initially, it was when I was a little kid, really. When I was, my mom was of the kind of hippie generation, and she was into, Ram Dass and Hare Krishna movement and Buddhism and all this kind of stuff. She wrote her master's thesis on William Blake and the psychedelic experience. So I kind of grew up with this milieu of this consciousness. And so if I was upset about something or if I was anxious or whatever, she would sit me down and, talk about, be here now, live in the moment, look at the flowers, whatever it was. So it was taught meditation at quite an early age, but it didn't really stick consistently through my life. There'd be, periods where it would be on and off.
Where are you today with it? Have you gone back to it in the last like 3 or 4 years at all?
Yeah, fairly consistently for at least the last 4 or 5 years, something like that.
And are you sometimes slipping into a broader experience than just meditating? Are you getting light at all? Are you definitely getting the effects afterwards of more inner calm? But can you spend a little time on that?
Yeah, I'm not getting special effects kind of thing very much these days. And I think that's partly because of the work I do, which is super heady, and I'm constantly thinking about altered states of consciousness and the afterlife and out-of-body experience. I've been kind of using meditation as grounding more than exploring the inner psyche or inner worlds or um, nature of consciousness and things like that. So it's almost the opposite of what other people do. Their
Sure.
waking life is the reality, and the meditation is the kind of exploration. Whereas, yeah, for me, it's just become a more kind of Buddhist mindfulness sort of practice of uh, grounding and being in the moment and centering and realizing that I'm actually here present in a physical body and I'm not just consciousness like all these people I'm reading about in my studies. So,
I love it. And we'll talk a little bit more about exploration in just a second. One quote, though, from a NASA astronaut, Story Musgrave, getting out of the comfortable path, that's what exploration is all about. Talk to us about the dynamics behind your exploration as you're doing your research. You've had to travel. This is very scientific, very documented. Um, but what have you had to do to get out of your own way? And I think you've started touching on it to really allow almost the universe to come in, or the culture that you're looking at, or the material, the text. There's a way to kind of feel into it, I believe, that makes someone a Sherlock Holmes, a good researcher. You just have a sixth sense on which direction to go digging more. Talk to us
mm.
about those dynamics before we get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, it is an interesting process because I also have done creative writing and I play music, so I understand the creative flow that people talk about, that kind of oceanic experience where you almost feel like your creativity is coming from outside. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's just that you're getting out of your own way and letting um, your mind do what it's supposed to be doing. And for me, the scholarly sort of research is a very similar kind of thing. I think it's probably different parts of my brain that's working, but the kind of analytical processing of the information, the research itself, and like you said, knowing which path to follow and where to find the correct information, and then how to process it, and then how to write about it in a way that's clear and lucid and relatable to other people. It is all part of this kind of creative process that I think is pretty similar to music or creative writing or anything else.
If you wanted to highlight not your biggest book, to put it that way, but what's the book people should check out first, or the one that's won the most awards or you're most known for? But you can go ahead and mention 3 or 4 books if you want. Can you just lay it out for us a little bit, but can you spend some time on one?
Sure. I think the one that's coming out, which I just happen to have right here, Near-Death Experience in Ancient Civilizations. Um, this is out. well, this will be in May, so it's out now, effectively. Um, it's a kind of it's the director's cut of of my first book. It's a reimagining, a rewriting, updating. Um, my first book was based on my PhD, which I did at University of Wales in Lampeter, and because I was concerned with academic protocols, criticisms, peer review, getting a job, things like that, I presented it in a extremely formal academic way. So even though it's about near-death experiences and the afterlife, the near-death experience I scaled way, way back and looked at it as one theory among many that could explain afterlife beliefs across cultures. Whereas now I kind of had after writing two other books and having, another 20 years of research in this area, this new version was able to benefit from my current insights. It was also able to benefit from research that's been done in these areas since then, especially things like when I first wrote it, there was no English translation of the Rig Veda, believe it or not. There were just excerpts here and there, and at least not a complete reliable one. So now there is one. There's a massive three-volume scholarly work. So, I combed through that. I kind of started over with a lot of this stuff, and I found more examples of NDEs in different cultures. So it's really, yeah, like I say, it's the director's cut. It's 25 years in the making version of this book. And I also just language-wise, I rewrote it almost completely. Um, so it's kind of couched in academic terms. I don't use words like structuralism and phenomenology, and I don't delve into the academic debates that only one or two disciplines would be interested in. I made it I didn't dumb it down, but I made it understandable and relatable to anybody, I think.
I love it. It's funny when you said phenomenology. I know when I was popping 13 or 14 years ago, I was grabbing source material wherever I could find. So I stumbled on Jonathan Ellerby, PhD's master's thesis, or it was the PhD one, but it was experiences in Africa with the Lakota Sioux tribe, but he very much couched it in phenomenology, and it was very distant when he was having direct experiences. He had a fine line to walk. He's an ex Canyon Ranch spiritual director, and many other places has headed up a few organizations up in Canada. He's been a guest on the show a couple times, and he has traveled, I think, 40 countries in 30 years, but
Wow.
endless stories from him. He's not allowed to participate in the ceremony deep in the Amazon jungle. He can't drink the juice, but he sticks around till 2 a.m. with the three old medicine men who invite him back. And that's coming out, or that came out in January of 2025, where he shares that Amazon experience. Could you do that for us? Could you take us to a physical location around the globe where you actually had a connection of some sort? It could have just been with the earth, the location, the culture. You felt like you'd maybe been there before. What has resonated as a location around the globe a lot, or two places?
The first one that comes to mind is one of the most recent. I was in Belize and Guatemala in November, October and November, and it was just a break to get away from the world and responsibility of the dog and the house and everything else. And there's one particular Mayan site called Nabatunich, and it's quite small and it's a little bit remote. Well, it's off the main road going to Guatemala, but a lot of people don't visit it because it's not Tikal and it's not one of these big name sort of sites. So there had been floods that the previous week. There was the big storm. Was it Hurricane Sarah or whatever? I think that's the one. And so the day I got to this site, it was the first day it had opened after about a week, and so nobody was there. You have to take a ferry across the little river, and it's a little hand cranked ferry, which is a guy just kind of cranks this thing and ferries you across. And then it's a mile walk up a hill to get to the site. And it was the day after election, so that was a little disorienting. And I just climbed to the top of the highest pyramid there and just had this incredible view out across the Belize landscape on one side, the Guatemala landscape on the other side, just this canopy of trees and forests, the sounds of howler monkeys in the distance, which if you haven't heard them, they sound like, you're in Jurassic Park or something. It's this growling, menacing kind of sound. There's toucans in the trees, spider monkeys. I mean, it's just a really amazing spot. And then you've got these ancient pyramids and astronomy observation buildings built by the Maya below you. and a few tourists coming and going, and I couldn't leave. I just sat there meditating for a while, and then came out of the meditation just completely um, engrossed in this space and this time and this moment. And it was almost, sunset by the time I finally climbed down from there because it was just such a great experience. So
In 2 years, I've never asked this question of a single guest. So, um, how are you in that moment? Can you describe which part of you would you say was most receptive? Was it your whole body? Do you say it in terms of a feel? Do you say it's just your heart? You're a language word person. Can you take a shot at painting some wide or small brush strokes on how are you taking it all in? How are you connecting? And I'm getting goosebumps on that. I'd love to hear your words, how you're describing the letting go process.
that's interesting and not something I'd really thought about before, but I think it's a very personal thing. And again, for me, it's probably the opposite of what it would be for some people. I think for a lot of people, it would be like you maybe escape from the physical reality and maybe you feel your consciousness is at one with everything. For me, at least in that moment, it was a centering and it was the sense of presence and alignment, I guess, of my consciousness and my body and my physical surroundings. So, in that sense, I guess it's a oneness. Um, but it was me within this environment rather than it's not like my I don't know, consciousness particles merged with the environment, as mystical experiences are sometimes described. It was more like the presence. I think I felt, and I think maybe that's because my consciousness is elsewhere most of the time anyway. So for it to be aligned in my body in the place where I am, and that happens a lot when I travel. So that's one of the benefits for me for traveling is it kind of forces you to be here now. Yeah.
And you have a wonderful way with words. That was one of those. So you did it
Oh,
great.
thanks.
Answer. Yeah. If you could now switch hats to all the different cultures you've touched, whether it's from really far in the past, more recent, somewhere in between, what are a couple of cultures and a couple of points you'd like to highlight from those generations or eras, that history that you think has a lot of relevance today?
Wow, that's an even tougher question, Michael.
Yeah, well, take it any way you want. You're good. And yeah, I'll blow some sage real quick to buy you time. And I'll tell a dad joke. This is one of those
Okay.
moments where just feel what you can feel, let your heart do the smelling. It's the Zen thing, smelling without smelling. But I'll say it a different way, catching the scent without doing any catching. And the only rule or structure I've got is set your intent. Tons of guests have done this, the panelists jointly on this. So at home, if you need to set your intent, just ask the universe to get in here, out of your head, into your heart. Your heart knows how to hit the baseball with the baseball bat, or plant the flower, or enjoy the eggs that you just cooked. The brain doesn't, the brain says, hey, I want to hug the dog. And 2 weeks later, you still haven't hugged the dog. Um, you got to actually hug the dog or take it for a walk. Okay, here's the sage. Give yourself a break, catch a little bit of sage. And if anybody wants to get flowers or an ocean smell, no try Yoda. I'll do Yoda's voice to really throw myself under the bus. This is embarrassing. But if you're laughing, you're letting go. So do, do not. There is no try. Okay. Are you catching a little sage in California, Gregory?
Possibly. You know me,
Possibly.
Michael.
That's it. That's okay. You're given your role, you're not allowed to actually on air say or do anything, and I get it, and that's why you're still invited back to the show always. But
Thanks.
let's do this. What part of our mankind's history, culturally speaking, and maybe in order, we'll turn the screw on you a little bit. What number one culture has the most relevance for today as mankind maybe has a little bit more awareness, consciousness coming in, a little more kindness and gentleness? What do you think? Draw the connections. This is actually turning into a class, and we're dying to know this one.
Um, I don't I don't think I can answer that in a straightforward way. I think instead, because I've done all this cross-cultural research, so for example, the Ancient Civilizations book, it's comparing afterlife beliefs in ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia, China before Buddhism, India before proper Hinduism as we know it, and Mesoamerica, Mayan, and Aztec. And all of them, I think, have their own types of ancient wisdom, basically. Um, and I think maybe it's the commonalities that they share that I think are the most profound and relevant uh, to the present time, especially as relates to life after death, because all of them, their beliefs are that, we don't die when our bodies die. We go on to some other realm or state of being. That's often described in similar ways as near-death experiences. You go through a period of darkness, you come out into a realm of light, you meet a being of light, you meet your deceased ancestors. There's some kind of review of your life that you just left, and in some cases, depending on the nature of the text, you're sent back to your body. Obviously, the ones that are intended to steer the dead soul through the afterworld, you don't come back to your body. It just tells you where you're going next. But for the most part, I think they share that sort of commonality. And then also the earlier texts in all of these civilizations, they're not filled with all these threats of punishments and um, you know detailed descriptions of what's going to happen to you if you committed this particular sin or transgression. Most of them they don't have that. Those things come in later when the texts become more popularized and more accessible, when literacy increases, when more people are able to read about the afterlife, and more people are becoming, I guess, indoctrinated into the religious system of the culture. And I think at that point, it's because the elite are seeing it as a way of, controlling the populace, basically, instituting this idea of the threat of hell and the promise of heaven, which wasn't really there in the earliest beliefs. So, which to me kind of bolsters my argument that near-death experiences are, you know, kind of the origins of these types of beliefs across cultures, because in very few near-death experiences do we have those negative punishment types of descriptions.
Hmm, wonderful. Who have you enjoyed as different either historians, researchers? It could be Moody. Who's out there that you just enjoy their works? It might not be exactly in line with the way you roll, but who have you thoroughly enjoyed over the years?
First one that comes to mind is actually two. One is a classical scholar who's now deceased. I think he died in the 60s, and his name is W.F. Jackson Knight, and he was a British scholar, I think, at University of Essex, a classicist. And he's interesting because he was the translator of the Penguin edition of Virgil, and obviously Penguin is a big publisher, and this was the standard version of translation of Virgil for decades. What most people don't know, and I think what the editors at Penguin didn't know, was that through a medium, Jackson Knight was communicating with Virgil in the other world to help him with his translation. So if he had a question about what a certain Greek phrase meant according to the text, um, he would be able to, supposedly contact Virgil through this medium and then correct his version of the translation. Uh, and that's almost a side reason why I'm interested in him. Another one is that he actually was one of the first scholars in classical studies who recognized the existence of near-death experiences in these ancient texts. And he's right, he was writing at a time when near-death experience hadn't been named. There was no such term. So the experiences were happening, but before Moody, we didn't have the word. But he describes them, as accounts of people who left their body, went to other worlds, came back and told what they saw. But most interestingly, he said he thinks that those cases are what are where people got their afterlife beliefs. That's where they were inspired to, not verbatim, obviously, but to it inspired them to create the afterlife uh, ideologies and theologies and system, that were kind of based on accounts of these experiences. So yeah, to me that was and that's only one example that I found of this. It's called the experiential source hypothesis in the academic world, and it's just essentially that these experiences lead to beliefs. Apparently, supernatural beliefs experiences lead to supernatural beliefs. So it's a kind of I look at it as like the hidden history of the afterlife in the history of religions, going back all the way to an anthropologist, E.B. Tyler. He wrote something along the lines of, there are many accounts of across cultures of people who have gone to the other world and returned and told what they saw. And he said, this could be evidence for where they got their afterlife beliefs. And then it's rediscovered and forgotten multiple times throughout history by anthropologists, by other historians of religion, by classicists, but it never sticks. And they never build on it in any uh, kind of rigorous or progressive way. They don't refer to earlier scholars who came up with this. It's like everyone comes up with it afresh, including me. When I started this work, I didn't know that anybody else had come up with this idea. So to me, that's really interesting, and I'm hoping to kind of consolidate that and bring it more to the forefront of the history of religion. So it's no longer the forgotten strand that keeps being buried and forgotten every decade.
Hmm. That's really fascinating. And I took Latin, I think, for 7 years between Phillips Academy Andover and then my sixth, seventh, and eighth grade outside of Annapolis, Maryland. So I was definitely reading a lot of, you read ancient stuff in the language and you get fluent enough that you're enjoying it, but not Greek. So I didn't get to experience Virgil. Okay, I'm going to ask two different questions. You can choose door number one, door number two. One is your openness and curiosity and how to foster it, because in a way, science speaks against it because you've got to know something that precludes possibility so you can fix it. And yet, unfortunately, some of those discoveries only last a week. A new one comes in, you're bumped out. And so it's a
Mhm.
real shell game at that level. But it's the currency of mankind right now is knowing something. The second is if you got a grant, you had to spend 6 months there geographically, somewhere around the globe. Everything's paid for, but you get to go wild with your research. You even get a couple grad school students to help you. What do you want to tackle first? The future project that hasn't come in yet that you're just like, that would be a blast. Or talk to us about how you're straddling that very fine line between curiosity, openness, and discovery versus having to stick with documentation, research, the kind of the staid methodology.
Right. Um, the second one's easier, I think. If I had those kinds of resources and lots of grad students to do my bidding, I would have them compile a database of all the cross-cultural and historical near-death experiences that they could find, including commissioning translations of works that have not been translated into English. So, for example, uh, there are a few ancient and medieval Chinese books that are specifically about near-death experiences. And it's just, that's what the entire book is about, which we know nothing about because they haven't been translated into English. And I don't even know if there's a Chinese reprinted edition or if they're just in manuscripts somewhere in China. So there's tons of stuff out there, tons of evidence that we just have no access to because there have been no resources for people to, explore that. And I'm sure all these, there's hundreds of unpublished, untranslated scrolls in Tibet, lots of stuff all over the world that the West, we're working with really just the tip of the iceberg cross-culturally.
Okay, and before we get to the balancing act that's between discovery, openness, curiosity versus curiosity killed the cat, and you got to stay
Yeah.
conservative. Talk to us about Indiana Jones a little bit. You do not wear a hat like him. You do not have competitors that are grabbing the crystal skull out of your hand saying, aha, I beat you to the discovery. But how many people are doing what you do around the globe, or is it really kind of a quiet pursuit? There aren't dozens and dozens or scores of others doing this, are there?
No, there aren't. So most of them, nobody's doing it on a cross-cultural level. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. There have been a couple of articles here and there. But as far as the publishing entire books on the subject, so I should also mention my other books, Near-Death Experience in Indigenous Religions, and that's looking at African, Pacific, and Native American near-death experiences. So that kind of focus and zooming in on this particular topic and then doing it in a comparative way is really not it's not a field. It's a field of one, pretty much. But there have been people like Alan Kelly here in Australia and James McLennan in the US. Um, they've both kind of were some of the first people who did cross-cultural NDE kind of studies. but it was really just like a chapter in a book or an article here and there. There's a Russian scholar in Israel named Yulia Ustinova. She's she did a couple of books about ancient Greek religion, and she talks quite a bit about near-death experience and arguing that near-death experiences are kind of the fundamental basis for ancient mystery cults, and she relates them to cave imagery and in Greek art. So again, it's like a few people here and there. Um, but as far as the cross-cultural thing and delving into, the real experiential source ideas and the different ways that different cultures process and interpret NDEs and the different ways they integrate them into their belief systems, I'm kind of the only one who does that. So,
Beautifully. Oh, beautiful. Okay. What's one area, if you were to put a wish out to the universe to just get over with, like get it over or get over with it? I don't know how to say it in English. Throw you over the fence so that you just allow for the experience to come in. You don't have to tell anybody about it. Here you're making that request though. What would you request to be able to allow more for as an interaction? Is it feeling more, having the connection more to historical figures? What would be a personal request that you would be okay with the universe delivering gently to you in the years ahead? So you're even more combat effective in your research, confident in the directions you're going. I hope I said that right. Is it more intuitiveness? Is it more feeling? Is it more walking onto a site and almost getting it
hmm.
when you're there? Could you make a small request of the universe right now that's gentle?
Okay. Out loud?
Yeah, out loud if you don't mind. So you're going to do this in a very measured way, but where could you use a little extra assistance on the letting go front that not a lot of folks would necessarily sign up for? But I think you've been involved in this for so long, you know exactly what that would be, just to relax more into it.
Yeah. I think it would really be getting out of my own way, not overthinking too much. Um, I don't really have doubts about the research itself or how I'm doing it or my arguments or anything like that. The doubts come in of more like, why am I doing this? What is why am I spending 25 years of my life researching this subject? So that's when I start hitting the stumbling block of, I guess it's really like a kind of existential question, which maybe is part of the research anyway. It's why am I doing this? What is the purpose of being on this planet? Is there a purpose of being on this planet? Am I making this my purpose? Why? So that those kinds of second guessing, the overthinking, which is, probably a symptom of being a scholar.
Well,
So,
it's yeah, par for the course, absolutely. And welcome to
yeah,
being human. I mean,
yeah, that
I'm
too.
going to be going back to thinking as soon as this show is taped. If have you had an experience with a shaman in the jungles of Amazon or in Central America or come close? And is that also on the dance card in the future where if it was a really well-known, safe experience somehow, would you be up for one more of those or perhaps a more modern figure assisting in some way that there's greater clarity at the end of the experience? Can you either share with us a past experience or could you say that certainly is something you wouldn't mind around the corner?
Sure. Yeah, I haven't had a past experience in that way. Um, I mean, my research is all historical, so I haven't really, other than some archaeological excavations when I, was still in the archaeology world. I haven't really done field work with living humans. It's been library research for the most part, um, and trips to places like pyramids in Belize and whatever. So it's been kind of and that's been really to just experience the sites where these cultures lived and to try to absorb them in a more immediate sort of way. Um, but yeah, I think I would possibly be open to it. And for me, uh, I guess it's an issue of trust and authenticity. I really, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. The kind of, I don't know how to put it in a way that doesn't sound too harsh, and also in a way that's accurate. But this kind of monetization of other cultures' spirituality, which other cultures will participate in. So you've got a kind of exploitative shaman type figure who's charging thousands of dollars to go glamping in the Amazon and take some ayahuasca and then be validated in what you're already thinking. Um, this kind of thing I'm not interested in all at all. So I would be really wary of finding the right kind of person to facilitate something like this. But because I also have had the kinds of experiences I mentioned, including psychedelic experiences when I was younger, I'm not sure I will necessarily learn something new. I might because of the context, but who knows?
If it was India, Amazon, Papua New Guinea, safely not getting eaten at the end of it all, or some other culture, Mexico, Native American, do you have a preference there at all? Again, if it was a trusted figure, uh, is there one of them that is jumping out at you right now?
Yeah, I think it would probably be Mexico, Belize, Guatemala area, either a Mayan or maybe Huichol shaman, something like that. Yeah, somebody who um, it's clearly a long history in their tradition, and it's not like they're I don't know taking on this new kind of therapy for Western tourists. So, or also possibly the Indian peyote church here. That could be a possibility. You know, they're deeply rooted in tradition too. Um, but yeah, I'm not motivated, and I've had opportunities throughout the years, and I just kind of feel like I don't feel like I need that.
Yeah.
But who
Vault
knows?
combination lock, if it turns exactly the right way with all the dials and then the handle clicks, you'll do it.
Right? Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. And I think if
Hey,
there's another, you asked about the scholars that I kind of connected to. The second one I just wanted to mention, Swedish anthropologist named Ake Hultkrantz, and he wrote a book called The Native American Orpheus Tradition, and that's all about shamanic journeys to the other world and in relation to near-death experience, which again is a term that didn't exist when he was writing this book. But he wrote this great essay about he was I can't remember the name of the tribe that he was working with, but it was a peyote ceremony that he was invited to, which not many Western people, especially an outsider scholar, was invited to back then. This is in the 50s, I think. And so he's in the circle in the tent, and they're giving him peyote, and he's describing it as this foul smelling, horrible black mush. And even just the thought of putting it in his mouth is making him gag. So so he hides it and kind of gets rid of it. And they see him and they say, no, no, here's some more. And so eventually he managed to ingest this stuff and had this, mind-blowing peyote trip in this tent with these shamans. And something like that I could imagine doing.
I love it. And that reminds me of Black Elk Speaks. I forgot the gentleman. Is it Niemeyer? It starts with an N.
Need heart, I think.
Need her. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And also, there's one other book. I think we talked about it last time you were on the show. It's the gentleman who covered all the indigenous tribes around the globe, their near death spiritual experience, more shamanic. It could be Hurwitz. I'm going to slaughter the name. Holger. It's like a complex German name.
It's not Holtkrantz, the guy I mentioned,
Mm,
no?
I can see the book cover. I wasn't prepared. I
Oh,
didn't bring it. Yes.
Holger Kawait.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yep. Beautiful book. Holy cow.
yeah,
Detailed indigenous Eskimo tribes in Russia somewhere. They'll to start off the seal hunt, the hunter goes to this cliff face and rubs a small stone on a rock for 3 days or 2 days straight until eventually the cave or the face of the rock opens and seal spirits come out. There's an interaction, and then the seal hunt is essentially blessed. Very
right.
transcendental. I mean, that's just one description, but it's
Yeah,
all over the map with those experiences.
yeah. I think he also talks about a Native American experience of a shaman pulling a crystal out of somebody's chest. And I was amazed to then later find an Australian account of the exact same thing.
It's a
And that's
Rory. Yeah, there's a name that I cannot find again. RORI. That's the actual one of the healing crystals that a clever man or Aboriginal healer
right,
will withdraw from the body, whether it's a form of I already had the crystal or it's actual. But please continue.
right. Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say that uh, absolutely no connection culturally or historically between Native Americans and Australian Aboriginal people. So to me, that was a really one of these inexplicable similarities cross-culturally that that can't be explained by an NDE. It can't be explained by diffusion of myth, from one culture to another. It's a total mystery as far as I'm concerned.
Now
Like
you've
how
done.
did they conceptualize this? And um, I mean, I can't kind of get around to thinking that this was a real occurrence, that there was a physical crystal, but somehow they both reached this symbol and this action of pulling a crystal out of the chest.
Very early on, someone like 13 years ago handed me a book that was a very heavy book, very expensive book with a very big index in the back. And they made me choose one word jumping out of the index, and it was RORI, Rory, which is the little crystal that the clever man or indigenous healer in Australia would carry um, for healing purposes. I've rarely, twice been able to find a reference, and I didn't print it out or capture it, so now I can't find it anywhere. I think the internet tightened up a little more in the last 10 years. I can't
Well,
reach as far back.
I talk about it in this book, so I'll send you the reference.
Oh, wow. And so what I wanted to do is go back to Australia for a second. Is that not one of those rare cultures that's still here? And we're talking a group that has basically continued tradition successfully, almost successfully the whole time. Have you
Yeah.
done time yet in Australia? Could that be on your dance card?
No, I did look at the historical accounts that 19th century anthropologists collected and missionaries and things like this. Um, I don't think it's very different in a lot of those societies now as it was then, and it's probably not any different going back thousands of years. They are seem to be one of the world's oldest continuous cultures. Um, so yeah, but it was interesting there because I have a slightly contrary nature, so so I feel like you agreed with that a little too emphatically. But, but so I always feel like if someone says you're not gonna find any examples of afterlife beliefs in Africa that are related to NDEs, then I'm gonna look even harder. So it was a similar kind of thing in Australia. I kept thinking, well, I've got to find some NDEs somewhere because I'm finding them everywhere, and I just didn't find any. And I finally realized that that's because the focus is on shamanic otherworld journeying, and they didn't just the context of whether you're dead or alive when it happens was irrelevant. It was the journey itself that was important. So all of the accounts are just portrayed as shamanic accounts. Whether or not they were NDEs, we just don't know. But in fact, it was the experience that would often lead the person to becoming a shaman. But yeah, they didn't. The death context didn't even matter. But so that's a really interesting example of a cross-cultural difference, I think. They're
Hmm.
still having the experience, but they're emphasizing different aspects of it.
Okay, and this is a technical question about our universities and institutes today. Can you name 2 to 4 institutes, universities, or programs somewhere that you think are doing a fantastic job at paying attention to these issues?
Wow. The humanities have just really been hammered.
I know they've been hammered, budget cuts, at staff, and a lot of changes in hiring and everything else. Where has it survived the best? Is it England, America, East Coast, New England, California, UCal, Asia? Who or Australia, perhaps? Or are they all taking a hit?
I think they've all taken a hit. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of quite a few departments in the UK that would have been relevant 10, even 5 years ago that are gone now. Yeah, it's just everything's kind of depleted. I mean, in the broader sense of like consciousness or spiritual studies, there are still places out there. There's IONS, for example,
Mhm.
um, Scientific and Medical Network, uh, BL Foundation, Society for Psychical Research, these kind of places, but they're really more interested in the experimental aspects and proving whether, these states are genuine, whether life after death is an actual thing. From the humanities standpoint, looking at religious experience, spiritual experience, it's really has tanked. I think there's still in the UK the Religious Experience Research Centre in Wales. It's part of the Alistair Hardy Trust, but I don't think it's super active anymore.
We can't hear anything here, so you don't have to worry about any noise.
Okay, good.
If you could, we're going to wrap it up though. Give us 3 of the biggest takeaways on why people should pay attention how it holds relevance to their current experience in life, and also moving ahead and looking again, only an eternal question again about mankind. I think we're all ready for a little less rat race or thinking it's not the big banks or this country or this political party or that. It's all of us could use a little less accelerator, a little more brake, and a little less doing. I think we all do so much every day. Like I said, I'll go right back to the rat race being up here in an hour. Um,
Mhm.
so slowing down, appreciating more just in the present moment, the be here now, Ram Dass stuff. Can you wrap it all together and give us the big push on why this is so important to pay attention to as a topic, the area of your research and so on?
I think because I don't want to say it shows that there's something beyond this life or whatever, because I don't feel like I'm in a position to say that. And in fact, your earlier question about straddling that line, I love the title of this, medieval religious book called The Cloud of Unknowing, and that's where I feel like I kind of dwell in that middle space. Um, but I think it's a good reminder anyway that we're part of this long historical path of philosophical metaphysical inquiry. We're not just in a bubble in this particular present moment. We're part of a kind of global history that's still unfolding. And I think it's very easy for people to get so wrapped up in the present moment and feel like somehow we're exceptional, whether that's negative or positive. It's still this almost like because I'm here, there's higher stakes right now. But I mean, when you look at what the ancient Romans went through, or especially or the pagans in early Christian Rome, or whoever was there, or the Native Americans, there's so many people who are in a life-threatening, cultural annihilating kind of situation that we're just not in right now yet, at least. And I think in every generation, in every era, there are people who feel that because they happen to be in it, then they're exceptional. This is the reality. This is what's important. But really, we're just a blip on the history of the planet, let alone of the universe. And maybe that's depressing to some people, but I think it's a sobering thing to remind us to like um, make what you can of this life now, because as far as we know, this is it. So enjoy it while you can. Um, Align yourself as I did on top of the Mayan pyramid as much as you can. Try to get your body and soul in alignment, your consciousness and your body, um, and yeah, not get too wrapped up in accumulation of wealth, or arguing with people on the internet, and remember what matters, I guess, to you, whatever that is.
Well, this has been exceptional and a delight. And I've got one last step that's more interactive. You don't have to put any cards on the table, though, because every time you come on the show in the next 6 to 10 months, let's say, there'll be something else. We'll take a little baby step. We'll see. I hope more will happen off camera one day. We are not putting any cards on the table, but I'm going to put my hands up, or one hand up in Texas. You'll put your hand up in the San Francisco area. Feel what you can feel. Don't judge. People can do this at home as well. Feel warmth, sparkle, tingle. You can not acknowledge anything, but let me know if you feel a little bit of warmth or a vibe. And again, it's speculation, of course. People at home breathe though, and I'll blow a little Hawaii through the microphone up top, and I'll whoosh with this hand just to reinforce. People at home have been putting in comments. They've been smelling the sage and so on. I was a guest on a show lately. A lot of people put that comment down. Okay, here we go. See if you can catch a single goosebump or maybe five. Gregory, you're on the spot. Everyone's watching. It's the end of the show. No one watches this part. Hit subscribe, like, share, comment though if you're here. Did you get anything?
There's a little warmth radiating from my computer, Michael.
That was the best answer I've gotten in 2 years of doing this. And I'm also shocked that we got to touch on the clever man, Australian indigenous healer, the crystal, because I'm very keen on that. That was just one of those fixed waypoints 13 years ago for me. And for the RORI is the name of the term, one of the ways to call that crystal for a clever man. So thank you for bringing that up. I don't believe in accidents. So Gregory Shushan, you are incredible. Thank you for coming on the
Oh,
show.
thanks,
It's
Michael.
great to see you again.
You too. Thanks for having me back on. Great.